Nathan Reed checked his Rolex for the third time in 5 minutes. The exclusive rooftop restaurant of the Archer Hotel offered breathtaking views of Manhattan's skyline, but he barely noticed the golden sunset painting the glass facades of neighboring skyscrapers. His mind was elsewhere, running through the logistics of tomorrow's board meeting and the potential acquisition that could cement his legacy as CEO of Reed Enterprises. "Mr. Reed, your guest has arrived," the maitre d' announced with practiced deference. Nathan nodded, straightening his custom Tom Ford suit as he stood. At 42, his dark hair was just beginning to silver at the temples, adding to the distinguished appearance that financial magazines frequently featured on their covers. America's most eligible bachelor, they called him. The irony wasn't lost on him. This was to be his last blind date. His sister Charlotte's final attempt at matchmaking before he committed fully to his self-imposed solitude. The company would be his wife, his legacy, the only children he needed. He'd made peace with that decision after years of meaningless connections that fizzled out beneath the weight of his ambition. He turned, prepared to offer his standard charming smile, and practiced small talk before the inevitable disappointment set in. But the smile froze on his face. Standing before him in an elegant navy dress was a ghost from his past. "Audrey?" His voice caught, barely audible above the ambient jazz and muted conversations surrounding them. Her honey blonde hair was shorter now, falling in soft waves to her shoulders instead of the waist-length style he remembered. But her eyes, those piercing hazel eyes, remained unchanged, as did the slight dusting of freckles across her nose that she'd always tried to conceal. "Nathan." Her voice was steady, revealing nothing of what must be churning beneath the surface. "Small world, isn't it?" The maitre d' pulled out her chair, oblivious to the tension crackling between them. Nathan sat mechanically, his practiced poise deserting him entirely. "Charlotte didn't tell me it was you," he managed finally, reaching for his water glass with a hand he forced to remain steady. "She didn't tell me it was you either," Audrey replied, placing her napkin on her lap with deliberate care. "Though I'm beginning to suspect this wasn't entirely coincidental." A waiter appeared, offering wine selections. Nathan ordered without registering his choice, his mind racing to make sense of the situation. Audrey Matthews, now Audrey Campbell according to the reservation, sat across from him after 10 years of silence. 10 years since he'd walked away from everything they'd built together in pursuit of what he'd convinced himself was a greater purpose. "You look well," he offered lamely, hating how inadequate the words sounded. "Success agrees with you too," she replied, her gaze flicking to his wrist. "Nice watch. Limited edition, isn't it?" Nathan resisted the urge to cover the timepiece. "Audrey, Let's not do that," she interrupted, her smile tight. "This is awkward enough without dredging up ancient history. I'm here because your sister is persistent, and you're here for the same reason. We can have a civilized dinner, catch up politely, and then go our separate ways. No harm done." But harm had been done. Nathan could see it in the careful way she held herself, the defensive barrier in her eyes that hadn't been there before he'd chosen ambition over love, New York over their small hometown in Massachusetts, his dreams over hers. The sommelier returned with wine, and Nathan welcomed the interruption, using the ritual of tasting and approval to gather his scattered thoughts. When they were alone again, he leaned forward. "How have you been, really?" Something flickered in her eyes, vulnerability quickly masked. "I've been good. I opened my own architecture firm 5 years ago. Small, but we're doing well, specializing in sustainable commercial designs." Pride surged through him unexpectedly. "You did it. That's what you always wanted. One of us had to keep our promises," she said, then immediately looked regretful. "I'm sorry. That wasn't fair." "No, it was perfectly fair." He swirled the ruby liquid in his glass, studying its movements rather than meeting her gaze. "I deserved that and more." Their appetizers arrived, dishes Nathan didn't remember ordering. The conversation shifted to safer topics. Mutual acquaintances from their hometown, changes in the industry, neutral ground that allowed them to speak without revealing too much. But beneath the polite exchange, Nathan felt an undercurrent of everything unspoken between them. "Your company's environmental initiatives impressed me," Audrey said eventually, surprising him. "I didn't expect that from Reed Enterprises." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "You've been following my career?" A slight flush colored her cheeks. "It's hard not to when your face appears on CNBC and Forbes regularly. Besides, the sustainability sector is small. Your green tech division is making waves." "That was always your influence," he admitted. I never forgot those arguments we had about corporate responsibility versus profit margins. And yet you built an empire on those profit margins. An empire that's now investing billions in renewable energy and sustainable infrastructure, he countered. Sometimes you have to play the game before you can change the rules. Their main courses arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. Nathan watched as Audrey took a small bite. The familiar way she closed her eyes briefly to savor the flavor stirring memories he'd long suppressed. Summer evenings on their tiny apartment balcony, sharing takeout containers while dreaming about their future. Her sketches spread across their bed as he massaged her shoulders. The Christmas morning he'd proposed, kneeling beside their pathetically small tree in matching flannel pajamas. "Why did you agree to this date?" he asked suddenly. "If Charlotte hadn't told you it was me." Audrey set down her fork, considering the question. "Honestly, I lost a bet with my business partner. She thinks I work too much." A wry smile touched her lips. "Apparently we have that in common. And if you'd known it was me, I wouldn't have come." The blunt truth landed between them like a physical object. "You left me standing in our apartment with half the furniture gone and a note. Nathan, a note." He flinched at the raw pain that broke through her composed exterior. "I've regretted that every day for 10 years. "Have you?" Her voice was quiet, but her eyes held his with an intensity that made it impossible to look away. "Because from where I'm sitting, you got everything you wanted. The corner office, the billion-dollar company, the penthouse apartment. What exactly did you regret?" Before he could answer, his phone vibrated against the table. The screen displayed his CFO's name, the third call in the past hour that he'd ignored. "Take it," Audrey said, leaning back. Some things never change. Ignoring the jab, Nathan declined the call again and turned his phone face down. "Nothing is more important than this conversation." She laughed, the sound lacking humor. "That's new." "Audrey, do you know what today is?" she interrupted, her fingers tracing the stem of her wineglass. Nathan frowned, searching his memory for the significance. It wasn't her birthday, which was in April. It wasn't the anniversary of when they met or started dating. Those memories he kept locked away in a mental vault he rarely opened. Then realization hit him with physical force. Today, 10 years ago, was the day he'd left, the day he'd accepted the position in New York and walked away from their 5-year relationship, their engagement, their shared dreams. "You knew," he whispered. "You knew it was me all along." "Charlotte didn't have to try very hard to convince me," Audrey admitted, meeting his gaze steadily. "I wanted to see if it still hurt, if you still remembered. If you'd become the man you thought was more important than us." Nathan's heart pounded against his ribs. "And your verdict?" "I haven't decided yet." She took a sip of her wine. "You told me once that someday I'd understand why you had to leave. That someday I'd thank you for making the hard choice for both of us. So here I am, Nathan. Make me understand." The weight of expectation in her words pressed against his chest. 10 years of justifications, of burying regret beneath achievements and accolades, of convincing himself he'd made the only possible choice. All of it suddenly seemed hollow beneath the steady gaze of the woman he'd once promised forever. Before he could formulate a response, his phone vibrated again, insistently this time. With an apologetic glance, he turned it over, prepared to silence it permanently. But the message on the screen made his blood run cold. "Urgent. Mitchell pulling out of merger. Share price already dropping in after-hours trading. Board emergency meeting called. Need you now." The future of everything he'd built hung in the balance of this moment. Thousands of jobs, billions in market value, his entire legacy, all potentially crumbling while he sat trying to explain a decision made a decade ago. Audrey watched the play of emotions across his face and nodded slowly. "You should go, duty calls." As Nathan looked between his phone and Audrey, he realized he was standing at the same crossroads he'd faced 10 years before, and this time the choice he made would truly be his last. "I'm not going anywhere." Nathan silenced his phone completely, placing it face down on the table with deliberate finality. Surprise flickered across Audrey's face, quickly masked by practiced skepticism. "Your empire is crumbling, and you're choosing dinner?" Her tone was light, but her eyes searched his with an intensity that made his chest tighten. "That doesn't sound like the Nathan Reed who makes headlines. Maybe I'm not that Nathan Reed tonight." He signaled the waiter for another bottle of wine. "You asked for an explanation. You deserve one." Audrey set down her fork, her meal barely touched. "I've waited 10 years. I suppose I can wait through dessert." The restaurant around them continued its elegant rhythm, waiters gliding between tables, the soft clink of fine china and crystal, murmured conversations punctuated by occasional laughter. Outside, the Manhattan skyline had transformed from golden sunset to glittering nightscape, a tapestry of lights and shadows against the darkening sky. Nathan had built his life among those towers, scaling the heights of corporate America with single-minded determination. Yet sitting across from Audrey made all of it feel strangely distant. "I told myself I was doing you a favor," he began, tracing the rim of his glass. "That I was setting you free to find someone who could give you what you wanted. Stability, a family, weekends that weren't interrupted by conference calls." "How noble," Audrey remarked dryly. "Self-sacrifice has always been your strong suit." Nathan accepted the barb with a slight nod. "I convinced myself it was better to make a clean break than to watch us slowly destroy each other. You wanted to stay in Massachusetts, build your firm there. I saw New York as my only path forward. You never asked if I would have come with you," she pointed out. "You just decided for both of us." "Would you have," he challenged, "left everything you were building, your family, your community projects?" Audrey's silence was answer enough. The waiter approached with their second bottle, but she covered her glass with her hand. "I'm switching to water, thanks." When they were alone again, she leaned forward. "You weren't wrong about everything, Nathan. We wanted different things, but you robbed us both of the dignity of choosing our own endings." That note, her voice caught, and she took a moment to compose herself. 3 sentences after 5 years together. "That's what I couldn't forgive." Shame burned through him, hot and uncomfortable. "I was a coward." "Yes, you were." Her blunt agreement surprised a laugh out of him. "Still painfully honest, I see." "One of us had to be." The undercurrent of anger beneath her words was justified, yet there was something else there too. A lingering curiosity, perhaps even a reluctant need for closure that mirrored his own. "So, what happened after?" he asked. "After I left?" Audrey considered him for a long moment, as if deciding how much to share. "I threw myself into work, moved back in with my parents temporarily, declined the job offer from Hartman and Associates that would have taken me to Chicago, started my own firm earlier than planned." She sipped her water. "I dated, not successfully." An unexpected pang of jealousy shot through him, irrational after all these years. "And now?" "Now I have Campbell Designs, 15 employees. Projects across 3 states. Pride colored her voice, lending it warmth. "We specialize in sustainable commercial architecture. That library renovation in Providence that won the Green Design Award last year, that was us." "I saw that article," Nathan recalled, genuinely impressed. "The solar integration with the historical facade was brilliant. I had no idea that was your firm." "The world doesn't revolve around Reed Enterprises," she remarked with the ghost of a smile, "though I imagine that's news to you." Their entrees sat forgotten as the conversation shifted into professional territory, safer ground where they could connect without rehashing old wounds. Nathan found himself increasingly captivated by the confident woman Audrey had become, so different from the somewhat uncertain architecture student he'd left behind. Her eyes lit up when she described her current projects, hands sketching invisible designs in the air between them. "What about you?" she asked eventually. "Beyond what I read in business journals, are you happy, Nathan?" The directness of the question caught him off guard. Happy, such a simple word for such a complex state of being. He'd achieved everything he'd set out to accomplish, built Reed Enterprises from a promising startup into a green technology powerhouse, accumulated more wealth than he could spend in several lifetimes, earned the respect of an industry that had initially dismissed him as too young, too idealistic. "I'm fulfilled," he answered carefully, "proud of what I've built." "That's not what I asked." Nathan studied the rich red of his wine, buying time. Happiness wasn't part of the equation. Success, impact, legacy, those were the metrics that mattered. And now? Now I have a company potentially imploding while I sit here reopening old wounds. He smiled to soften the words. "But strangely, I can't bring myself to leave." Audrey's expression softened marginally. "Why did you agree to this date, Nathan, before you knew it was me?" "Truthfully, to get Charlotte off my back." She's been playing matchmaker for years, convinced that my workaholic tendencies are a cry for help rather than a deliberate choice. He paused, weighing his next words carefully. "But I think part of me wanted one last attempt before accepting that some people aren't meant for partnerships." "One last date," Audrey echoed thoughtfully. "That's a rather final decision. I'm turning 43 next month. The company is entering a new phase with this merger, or was, before tonight's crisis. It seemed like the right time to stop pretending I was leaving room in my life for something I never prioritized. Your sister disagrees. Charlotte is happily married with 3 kids and a golden retriever. She thinks everyone should have the same. Audrey laughed, the sound startling in its genuineness. She always was determined to fix everyone around her. Remember when she tried to matchmake for Professor Wilson? The shared memory lightened the atmosphere between them. The poor man ended up hiding in the faculty lounge whenever he saw her coming. And yet here we are, victims of her latest scheme. Audrey's smile faded slightly, though I suspect this one was more calculated than she let on. Nathan nodded slowly. The timing is too perfect to be coincidence. Their gazes held across the table, acknowledging the manipulation that had brought them together and the unspoken recognition that neither of them was truly angry about it. The dessert menus arrived, offering a momentary reprieve from the intensity of their exchange. Nathan found himself studying Audrey's profile as she reviewed the offerings, the slight furrow between her brows as she concentrated, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, gestures so familiar they made his chest ache with unexpected nostalgia. "You're staring," she observed without looking up. "I'm remembering," he corrected softly. Her eyes lifted to his, wariness battling with something warmer. Dangerous territory. "I've built a career on risk assessment, Audrey. Some risks are worth taking." Before she could respond, a commotion near the entrance of the restaurant drew their attention. Nathan recognized his executive assistant, Trent, scanning the dining room with barely contained panic. Their eyes met, and Trent's relief was palpable as he hurried toward their table, tablet in hand. "Mr. Reed, I apologize for the interruption," he began, his professional demeanor strained by obvious stress, "but the situation is critical. Mitchell's withdrawal has triggered a panic among other investors. The stock has dropped 17% in after-hours trading, and the board is assembled in the conference room waiting for you." Nathan glanced at Audrey, whose expression had closed off, the wall between them reconstructing itself brick by brick. "Go," she said quietly. "This isn't 5 years and an engagement, it's just dinner." Something in her dismissal sparked unexpected defiance in him. "Trent, tell the board I'll join them virtually in 20 minutes. Email me the latest numbers and have legal prepare options for forcing Mitchell to honor the terms of our agreement." Trent blinked in surprise. "Sir, Mr. Harrington was quite insistent." 20 minutes, Trent." Nathan's tone made it clear the matter wasn't up for discussion. "And have a car waiting for Ms. Campbell whenever she's ready to leave." When they were alone again, Audrey studied him with renewed curiosity. 20 minutes won't save your merger." "No," he agreed, "but it's enough time to finish our conversation." "Which part? The one where you explain why you left, or the one where you justify why you're still the same man who would choose career over connection?" The challenge in her voice was unmistakable, but Nathan saw beyond it to the hurt that still lingered after all these years. He reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but close enough that she could bridge the distance if she chose. "What if I told you I made the wrong choice 10 years ago?" Her eyes widened fractionally, guard dropping for a split second before skepticism returned. "I'd say it's convenient timing for a revelation, with your company in crisis and your legacy at stake." "Perhaps," he acknowledged, "or maybe seeing you again has forced me to recognize what all this success has cost." Audrey's phone chimed with a text notification. She glanced at it, then back at Nathan with a strange mix of emotion crossing her face. "Speaking of revelations," she said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you, Nathan, something I should have told you the moment I walked in." The gravity in her tone sent a chill down his spine. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders as if preparing for battle. "You didn't just leave me 10 years ago, Nathan. You left us." "Us?" Nathan repeated, the single syllable hanging between them as his mind raced to comprehend her meaning. The restaurant around them seemed to fade into a distant blur as he focused entirely on Audrey's face, searching for confirmation of what his heart already suspected. "Yes," she said softly, meeting his gaze with unwavering steadiness despite the slight tremor in her hands. "Us." Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously as understanding dawned. "You were pregnant," he whispered, his voice barely audible even to himself. "When I left." Audrey nodded once, her composure remarkable given the magnitude of her revelation. "I found out 3 days after you disappeared to New York. I was going to call you that night, but then your note arrived instead." The floor beneath Nathan seemed to tilt. His carefully constructed world, the empire he'd built, the sacrifices he'd justified, The narrative he'd told himself about doing what was best for everyone. All of it collapsed under the weight of this new reality. "We have a child," he stated. Not a question, but an attempt to solidify this staggering truth in his mind. "We have a daughter," Audrey corrected, her expression softening slightly. "Her name is Abigail. She's 9, almost 10. Abigail," Nathan repeated, testing the name of a daughter he hadn't known existed until this moment. A daughter who had been growing, learning, living just a few hours away from him for nearly a decade. A wave of emotions crashed through him. Shock, grief, anger, longing. Too complex to untangle. "Why didn't you tell me?" A flash of indignation crossed Audrey's features. "You left me a note, Nathan. 3 sentences ending our engagement and 5 years together. You changed your number. You made it abundantly clear that your new life had no room for me, but a child—" "Yes, a child," she interrupted, leaning forward. "A child needs stability, commitment, presence, all things you explicitly rejected when you walked away. What was I supposed to do? Chase after you, use her as leverage to force you into a life you didn't want?" The accusation stung, but Nathan couldn't deny its underlying truth. The man he had been 10 years ago had ruthlessly excised anything that threatened his ambition, including the woman he'd once promised to love forever. "I had a right to know," he insisted, even as part of him recognized the hypocrisy of his indignation. "Perhaps," Audrey conceded, her tone softening slightly. "But I had a responsibility to protect her. After the first year, I tried to find you. I sent a letter to Reed Enterprises when the company made its first major acquisition. It came back unopened." Nathan closed his eyes briefly, remembering the strict instructions he'd given his first assistant about personal correspondence. Everything had been filtered, prioritized, based on business value. "I never saw it. I know that now. Back then it felt like another rejection." Audrey took a careful sip of water. "When Abby was 3, I consulted a lawyer about formally establishing paternity and potential custody arrangements. He advised me that given your complete absence and lack of interest, pursuing you might only disrupt the stable life I'd built for her. So you just decided I would never know my own daughter." Despite his effort to remain calm, hurt and anger edged into his voice. "No," Audrey said firmly. "I decided to wait until I could be certain that knowing you would benefit her rather than harm her. Your life has been splashed across business magazines and tabloids for years, Nathan. The workaholic CEO, the serial dater who never commits, the ruthless negotiator who sacrifices everything for the bottom line." Each description landed like a physical blow, not because they were untrue, but because they reflected exactly the image he'd cultivated. The man who had left Audrey had become exactly who he'd intended to be. Successful, powerful, unencumbered by emotional attachments that might limit his rise. "Does she know about me?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't suppress. Audrey nodded. "She knows your name, that you're her biological father, that you and I were engaged once but separated before she was born. I've never spoken negatively about you to her, Nathan. I promised myself I wouldn't do that to either of you." A hollow laugh escaped him. "So she knows her father abandoned her mother and never looked back. Hardly a glowing recommendation." "She knows her father is a successful businessman who built something significant," Audrey corrected gently. "I've shown her articles about Reed Enterprises' environmental initiatives. She's proud of that connection, even if it's distant. The thought of his daughter, reading about him, forming opinions about a father she'd never met, sent a fresh wave of loss through him. 10 years of firsts he'd missed. First steps, first words, first day of school, birthdays and Christmases and skinned knees he hadn't been there to witness or soothe. "Why tell me now?" he asked finally, struggling to process the torrent of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Audrey reached into her purse and withdrew her phone, unlocking it with her thumbprint before sliding it across the table. "This is why." The screen displayed a text message from a contact saved as Mom. "Abby's fever is up to 103 again. Doctor says we should take her to the ER if it doesn't come down in the next hour. Don't worry yet, but thought you should know." Fresh concern jolted through Nathan as he looked up from the message. "She's sick. She has a persistent infection that hasn't responded to antibiotics," Audrey explained, her composure finally cracking to reveal the worry beneath. "This is the 3rd round of high fevers in 2 weeks. Her pediatrician ordered additional tests yesterday. Why are you here instead of with her?" Nathan couldn't keep the accusation from his voice. "Because she's asking questions I can't answer anymore," Audrey replied, reclaiming her phone. Questions about family medical history, whether there are genetic conditions she should know about, things that become increasingly relevant as the doctors search for explanations. Understanding dawned. You need my medical information. Yes, Audrey admitted, but it's more than that. She's been asking about you more frequently. Wanting to know why you've never tried to contact her, whether you know she exists if you've ever asked about her. I've run out of gentle ways to explain your absence. Shame washed over Nathan, so acute it was almost physical. I had no idea, he said, the inadequacy of the words painful even to his own ears. I know that, Audrey acknowledged. That's why I agreed to Charlotte's setup. Abby deserves better than half-truths, and you deserve to know about her. Whatever else has happened between us, that much is true. Nathan's phone vibrated insistently against the table, the screen lighting up with multiple missed calls from his executive team. The crisis he'd momentarily pushed aside was escalating, demanding his attention. Yet it seemed impossibly trivial compared to the revelation that he had a daughter, a sick daughter, who had been wondering about him her entire life. Show me, he said suddenly. Do you have a picture? Audrey hesitated only briefly before navigating to her photo gallery. She paused on an image and turned the screen toward him. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. The girl in the photo had Audrey's honey-blonde hair and his own deep blue eyes. She was sitting cross-legged on what appeared to be a window seat, utterly absorbed in a book, sunlight catching the same golden highlights in her hair that Audrey's had always held. Something in her concentrated expression, the slight furrow between her brows, the way she tucked her lower lip beneath her teeth, was so familiar it made his chest ache. He'd seen that exact expression in the mirror countless times when tackling a complex problem. She loves reading, Audrey offered softly. Math, too. Top of her class in both, and she's obsessed with building things. She has more Lego sets than our house has room for. Pride surged through Nathan, immediately followed by an overwhelming sense of loss for all he'd missed. Does she look like me? Besides the eyes, I mean. When she concentrates, she's all you, Audrey confirmed with a small smile. And when she sets her mind on something, there's no moving her. Stubborn as a reed. What else? Tell me everything. For the next several minutes, as Nathan's phone continued to vibrate with increasing urgency, Audrey painted a portrait of their daughter. Abigail Jane Campbell, named for Audrey's grandmother, was precocious and determined, with a passion for architecture that had emerged as soon as she could hold a crayon. She played soccer reluctantly, for the social aspect, Audrey explained with amusement, not the athletic one, took piano lessons enthusiastically, and had recently developed an interest in environmental science that had led to a rather ambitious composting project in their backyard. She sounds amazing, Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. You've done an incredible job with her. She is amazing, Audrey agreed. And yes, I have. The pride in her voice was well earned, and Nathan felt a fresh wave of remorse for all the burdens she'd carried alone. I want to meet her, he said suddenly, the words escaping before he could consider their implications. If that's possible, if she wants to. Caution immediately replaced the warmth in Audrey's expression. It's not that simple, Nathan. You can't just walk into her life and then disappear again when your company needs you. I wouldn't. 20 minutes ago, you were willing to write off relationships entirely, she reminded him. Your executive is probably having a coronary watching you ignore a corporate meltdown. Your entire identity is wrapped up in Reed Enterprises. I can't let Abby become collateral damage to your ambition a second time. Her words landed with the precision of arrows finding their mark. Before Nathan could formulate a response, a new text message chimed on Audrey's phone. She glanced down, her face paling. I need to go, she said, already gathering her things. Mum's taking Abby to the emergency room. The fever's not coming down. Nathan stood immediately. Let me come with you. Audrey hesitated, visibly torn between immediate concern for their daughter and wariness about Nathan's sudden involvement. That's not a good idea. She doesn't know I'm seeing you tonight. Meeting you for the first time while she's sick and frightened would be overwhelming. Logic battled with the newfound paternal instinct surging through him. Then let me at least get you there. My driver is waiting downstairs. He'll get you through traffic faster than a taxi. After a moment's consideration, Audrey nodded. All right. Thank you. As they moved toward the exit, Trent intercepted them, his expression stricken. Mr. Reed, the board is demanding. Not now, Nathan interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. Ms. Campbell has a family emergency. We're leaving. But sir, the Mitchell deal can wait, Nathan finished firmly. He turned to Audrey, who was watching the exchange with a mixture of surprise and skepticism. Some things are more important. The elevator ride and walk through the hotel lobby passed in tense silence. Outside, Nathan's black Maybach idled at the curb, his driver jumping out to open the door as they approached. Children's Hospital on York Avenue, Audrey instructed as they settled into the leather back seat. As the car pulled into traffic, Nathan turned to find Audrey watching him with an inscrutable expression. "What?" "That's the first time I've ever seen you choose something over work," she said quietly. "I'm trying to decide if it's genuine, or if you'll be checking your email before we reach the hospital." The observation stung, but Nathan couldn't deny its fairness. "Audrey, I just found out I have a daughter, a sick daughter. Do you really think anything else matters to me right now?" "I don't know," she answered honestly. 10 years is a long time, Nathan. People don't change their fundamental nature overnight, not even for bombshell revelations. Before he could respond, his phone rang again, his board chairman's direct line. With deliberate movement, Nathan powered off the device completely and slipped it into his jacket pocket. "Maybe not overnight," he conceded, "but some revelations demand immediate recalibration of priorities." For the first time that evening, genuine softening showed in Audrey's expression. "She'll be okay," she said, though whether to reassure him or herself wasn't clear. "She's strong." "Like her mother," Nathan replied. A ghost of a smile touched Audrey's lips. "And stubborn like her father." As the car navigated through Manhattan's evening traffic, Nathan gazed out at the glittering towers he'd helped build, feeling as though he was seeing them and himself from an entirely new perspective. The empire that had consumed him, that had seemed worth any sacrifice, suddenly felt hollow compared to the bright-eyed girl in Audrey's photograph. A daughter he hadn't known existed. A daughter who needed him now. The realization settled over him with absolute clarity. Nothing would ever be the same again. The emergency room at Children's Hospital pulsed with controlled chaos. Worried parents, efficient medical staff, the occasional cry of a child cutting through the institutional hum of equipment. Nathan followed Audrey through the automatic doors, feeling strangely disconnected from reality, as if he were watching himself move through a dream. "I'll wait here," he said as they approached the registration desk, suddenly uncertain of his place in this unfolding situation. "Unless you want me to—" "No, this is better," Audrey agreed, her focus already shifting to the crisis at hand. "I'll come find you once I know what's happening." Nathan nodded, watching as she approached the desk with the practiced efficiency of a mother who had navigated medical bureaucracy before. He found a seat in the waiting area, conspicuously overdressed in his Tom Ford suit among the weary parents in casual clothes. The surreality of the moment wasn't lost on him. 12 hours ago, his biggest concern had been finalizing the Mitchell merger. Now he sat in a pediatric emergency room, waiting for news about a daughter he hadn't known existed this morning. Across the room, a father paced with an infant on his shoulder, patting the baby's back with gentle rhythm while murmuring soothing nonsense. The simple, everyday intimacy of the gesture made Nathan's chest tighten with a sudden, acute awareness of all he had missed, all the moments of ordinary parenthood that had continued without him, creating an invisible chasm between the life he'd built and the one he'd unknowingly abandoned. His phone remained powered off in his pocket, a tangible reminder of the choice he'd made tonight. By now, the board would be in full crisis mode. The Mitchell merger, his legacy project, the culmination of 3 years of strategic positioning, was likely collapsing in his absence. Shareholders would demand accountability, financial analysts would question his judgment. The business press would speculate about his sudden disappearance during a critical negotiation. For the first time in his career, Nathan found he didn't care. Nearly 40 minutes passed before Audrey returned, her expression slightly less tense than before. "They've admitted her for IV antibiotics and fluids. The fever's starting to respond, but they want to monitor her overnight." Relief washed through him. "That's good news, right?" "Better than when we arrived," Audrey confirmed, sinking into the chair beside him. She looked exhausted, the composed woman from dinner replaced by a worried mother running on adrenaline and fear. "They're running more tests to identify what's causing the infection." "What can I do?" Nathan asked, the need to take action, to fix something, anything, nearly overwhelming. Audrey considered him for a long moment. "They're settling her in a room now. Once she's comfortable, if you want to meet her, I told her you're here." The simple statement sent Nathan's heart racing. "You did? What did she say?" "She asked if you were wearing a suit." A tired smile briefly lifted the corners of Audrey's mouth. "Apparently. Every picture she's seen of you has been from business magazines." "And I didn't disappoint," Nathan observed, glancing down at his formal attire with a self-deprecating grimace. She also asked if you were angry about not knowing about her. The question pierced him. What did you tell her? The truth. That you just found out, that you weren't angry at her, and that you wanted to meet her if she felt up to it. Audrey tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous gesture he remembered from years ago. She said yes. A nurse appeared at the waiting room entrance. Miss Campbell, Abigail's room is ready. You can come back now. Audrey stood, then looked at Nathan with a question in her eyes. After a moment's hesitation, he rose to follow her. The walk through the hospital corridors seemed both endless and too brief, giving him barely enough time to process the magnitude of what was about to happen. Wait, he said suddenly as they approached the room. I should know. What does she call me when she talks about me? Just my dad, Audrey replied softly, or my father, when she's being formal. But she's never met you, so she might be more comfortable using your name at first. Nathan nodded, trying to swallow past the tightness in his throat. Anything else I should know before we go in? Audrey considered the question seriously. She's feeling pretty awful right now, so don't expect too much conversation. And she might fall asleep. The medications make her drowsy. She paused, then added, She has your smile. Just so you're prepared. With that final piece of information settling like a weight in his chest, Nathan followed Audrey into the hospital room. The first thing he noticed was how small she looked in the standard hospital bed, her slight frame dwarfed by the institutional furnishings. Her honey-blonde hair, darker than Audrey's but with the same golden highlights, was pulled back in a messy ponytail, strands escaping to frame a face flushed with fever, an IV line snaked from her arm to a pump beside the bed, and a pulse oximeter glowed red on her finger. Despite her obvious illness, Abigail Campbell was immediately, unmistakably his daughter. The shape of her eyes, the set of her jaw, the thoughtful furrow between her brows as she looked up from the tablet she was holding, all reflected the face he saw in the mirror each morning. Hey, sweetheart, Audrey said, moving to the bedside and brushing hair from Abigail's forehead with practiced tenderness. How are you feeling now? Better, Abigail replied, her voice smaller and more subdued than Nathan had imagined. The nurse says my temperature is down to 101. That's good news, Audrey smiled, though Nathan could see the lingering worry in her eyes. Abby, there's someone here who wanted to meet you. She turned slightly, gesturing toward where Nathan stood frozen in the doorway. This is Nathan Reed. Abigail's eyes, his eyes, met his, with a directness that was startlingly adult. You're my father, she stated, neither a question nor an accusation, simply a fact being confirmed. Yes, Nathan managed, finding his voice. I am. He approached the bed slowly, hyper-aware of both Audrey's watchful gaze and the momentous nature of this first meeting. Up close, the resemblance between them was even more pronounced, sending a fresh wave of emotion through him. Mum says you didn't know about me until tonight, Abigail continued, studying him with the same analytical intensity he recognized from his own approach to new information. That's right, Nathan confirmed, settling carefully into the chair beside her bed. If I had known, I would have been there. I want you to understand that. Abigail considered this with a slight tilt of her head. Would you really? Mum says you're very busy being important. The innocent repetition of what had clearly been Audrey's diplomatic explanation for his absence struck him like a physical blow. He glanced at Audrey, who had the grace to look slightly abashed. I am busy, he acknowledged, turning back to his daughter. But never too busy for you, not anymore. Skepticism flickered across her young face. Your company is having an emergency tonight. Mum got a text about it at dinner. Surprise momentarily silenced him. Of course, Charlotte would have kept Abigail informed about her setup attempt. The realization that his daughter had been aware of the dinner, had perhaps been waiting for news of how it went, added yet another layer to the evening's revelations. Some things are more important than work, Nathan said finally, echoing the words he'd spoken to his assistant. You're more important. Abigail studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with the abrupt subject change characteristic of children, she asked, Do you really have a helicopter? The unexpected question startled a laugh from him. I do, actually, for business travel. I want to ride in it someday, she declared, then immediately looked to Audrey as if checking whether she'd overstepped. Maybe when you're feeling better, Audrey said carefully, we can discuss appropriate father-daughter activities. The phrase father-daughter activities sent a jolt of both elation and fear through Nathan. The enormity of what lay ahead, building a relationship with this child who was simultaneously a stranger and a part of himself, was daunting in its complexity. "I'd like that," he said softly, then added with more confidence, "In fact, I'm counting on it." Abigail's eyelids were growing heavy, the medication and her illness clearly taking a toll. "Are you going to disappear again?" she asked suddenly, the directness of the question belying her drowsy state. "No," Nathan promised, the word carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "I'm not going anywhere, Abigail. I've missed too much already." Seemingly satisfied with this answer, she allowed her eyes to close. Within minutes, her breathing had deepened into sleep, though the flush of fever still colored her cheeks. Nathan and Audrey sat in silence for several moments, watching their daughter's chest rise and fall in the rhythmic pattern of sleep. "She's incredible," Nathan whispered finally, unable to tear his gaze away from Abigail's face. "Yes, she is," Audrey agreed, her earlier wariness softened by the shared moment of parental pride. "She has questions about you every day, has since she was old enough to understand what father meant." "I want to answer all of them," Nathan said. "I want to be part of her life, Audrey. Whatever that looks like, whatever boundaries you need to set, I'll respect them, but I can't walk away now that I know she exists." "I wouldn't ask you to," Audrey replied. "Despite everything, I've never doubted that you would be a good father if given the chance. That's why I came tonight." The simple vote of confidence, coming after her earlier justified skepticism, meant more than Nathan could express. "Thank you for that." "And for raising her so well," Audrey nodded, then gestured toward the door. "We should let her sleep. The nurse said we could use the family lounge down the hall." The lounge was mercifully empty, offering a private space for the conversation they both knew was inevitable. Nathan sank onto a worn sofa, loosening his tie as the events of the evening caught up with him. "What happens now?" he asked, the question encompassing far more than he could articulate. Audrey settled into an armchair across from him. "That depends on you, Nathan, on what kind of father you want to be." "The involved kind," he answered immediately. "I've missed 9 years. I don't want to miss another day." "And Reed Enterprises? The merger that's falling apart as we speak?" Her tone wasn't accusatory, merely practical. "Your life is in New York. Ours is in Boston." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, mind racing through possibilities and priorities, with the same analytical precision he applied to business decisions. "The company will survive with or without the Mitchell merger. As for New York versus Boston..." He paused, the answer crystallizing with unexpected clarity. "Reed Enterprises has offices in Boston. I can relocate our headquarters if necessary." Surprise flickered across Audrey's face. "You would do that? For Abigail?" Without hesitation. The certainty in his voice reflected the fundamental shift that had occurred within him. "I built the company to create something lasting, something that would outlive me. But what's the point of a legacy if you have no one to leave it to?" Audrey studied him with renewed thoughtfulness. "You really have changed." "Not changed," Nathan corrected gently, "just reminded of what matters most." He leaned forward, meeting her gaze directly. "I know we can't simply pick up where we left off 10 years ago. Too much has happened. But I want a chance to be Abigail's father, a real father, not just a weekend visitor or holiday presence." "She needs that," Audrey acknowledged. "She needs you." The simple statement filled Nathan with equal parts joy and terror, the awesome responsibility of being needed by the daughter he'd just met. "And what about you, Audrey? What do you need?" The question hung between them, weighted with shared history and newfound complexity. Audrey took her time answering, her expression contemplative. "I need to know that this isn't temporary, that when the novelty wears off or when work demands your attention, you won't disappear from her life, from our lives." "I won't," Nathan promised, the words emerging with the same certainty that had driven his most successful business decisions. 10 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life walking away from you. I won't make that mistake again." A tentative smile touched Audrey's lips. "One step at a time, Nathan. Let's focus on Abigail first." He nodded, accepting the wisdom in her cautious approach. "Speaking of which, I should probably give you this." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a business card, scribbling on the back before handing it to her. "My personal cell number, reachable day or night, for anything either of you needs." Audrey accepted the card, her fingers brushing his in a brief contact that sent an unexpected current of awareness through him. "I'll add it to her emergency contact information at school. As her father, you should be listed." The simple acknowledgement of his rightful place in their daughter's life filled Nathan with a warmth unlike anything his professional accomplishments had ever provided. "Thank you." A comfortable silence settled between them, the antagonism of their dinner conversation replaced by the tentative beginnings of a new understanding. Outside the window, dawn was breaking over the Manhattan skyline, painting the eastern horizon in pale gold and rose. "You should probably turn your phone back on," Audrey suggested finally. "See what's left of your company." Nathan chuckled, the sound surprisingly light given the circumstances. "Probably," he agreed, though he made no move to do so. "But whatever I find, my priorities are clear now." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I'd like to take you both to breakfast once Abigail is discharged. Perhaps show you the Boston office I'll be relocating to." Audrey's smile widened slightly. "One step at a time, remember?" "Right," Nathan agreed, matching her smile with one of his own. "Though I've always been something of an overachiever." "That," Audrey said with a hint of the warmth he remembered from their past, "is something Abigail definitely inherited from you." As they rose to return to their daughter's room, Nathan felt a sense of purpose and clarity that had been missing from his life despite all his achievements. The empire he'd built, the wealth he'd accumulated, the power he'd wielded, none of it compared to the simple, profound joy of discovering he was a father. Of knowing that despite his past mistakes, he had been given a second chance at what truly mattered. The Mitchell merger might be lost, but Nathan Reed had found something infinitely more valuable, a family he hadn't known he was missing, and the opportunity to become the man he should have been all along. As they reached Abigail's door, Audrey paused, turning to face him with an expression that held both caution and hope. "Welcome home, Nathan," she said softly, the simple phrase encompassing far more than a geographical location. For the first time in 10 years, Nathan Reed felt he truly was home.